Hi, my name is Audrey Dowling, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on the future funding of higher education. This is for my BS 524 class, and I just kind of want to talk about the current higher education challenges that we face as far as the funding and those challenges for the future and some solutions that we can use to combat those issues. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, the higher education trends over the past 20 years have dramatically increased tuition costs and higher education costs. From 1987 to 2012, when you can see that from the chart here, there was a giant increase from 23.3% to 47% in 2012. So to kind of explain this increase, the president of the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, Paul, he was quoted in Financing for Colleges Declines as Costs Rise in the New York Times in 2013. And he said that reduced state funding and rising tuition, that are some of the reasons why of this trends, but also the numbers don't add up. So tuition revenues are up substantially due to higher prices and more enrollments, but just not enough to offset the losses of public funding. Students are paying more while public institutions are receiving substantially less money to educate them. These one-year decreases in funding and increases in student cost are unprecedented over his 40-year career in higher education. So that tells you there, even over the past 20 years, it's significantly increased, but then even over the past 40 years, I can imagine it's increased quite a bit. And I know that as students, we also feel this impact of the increasing cost of the tuition and the difficulties that we can find for funding our higher education. I know that with myself, I've had to use the different resources out there as far as scholarships to grants to student loans now. So I will kind of go into that a little bit later in the presentation. So the average tuition cost from 2001 to 2021, as you can see, has steadily increased. In 2001, it was between $10,000 and $20,000 for private colleges, and now in 2021, it's over $40,000. So that is well over a $20,000 increase in that period of 20 years. So again, that's a pretty dramatic increase in the tuition costs. Colleges costs over the past 10 years have also increased quite a bit. And this is an infographic that I pulled from the pulling up the higher ed ladder, myth and reality, and the crisis of college affordability. From public policy, tank demos, higher education, funding cuts are responsible for 79% of tuition increases. The report estimates that just 6% of tuition increases were caused by spending on construction, and 5% were caused by increased administrative costs associated with hiring part-time and full-time staff in areas such as admissions and things like that. So there are reasons for the tuition costs, not just the economy and the cost of living, but other reasons. It sounds kind of like maybe poor management of the board and them just deciding that the fix for the costs that they're incurring is to increase the cost for the students to attend school, which has created a whole other issue. And also it's made it very difficult for students to attend school if they don't have the support from their family members or don't have the capability to get assistance. There are several problems that are associated with the increasing cost of tuition. For starters, the middle-class families cannot afford to pay out of pocket for their children's education because they make too much, but then they can't afford to, they can't afford for the assistance, but they also can't afford to pay out of pocket. So therefore, they are stuck with taking out loans. And then the students also have to take out loans if they don't have family members that can do so for them. This results in accruing more debt. In addition, the federal loans accounting for much of the 1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt and more than 1 million people defaulting on their loans. So taxpayers are picking up much of the tab for this broken system. And this data came from the Heritage Foundation in 2021. So this obviously is a cycle that needs to be fixed. So I will continue talking about the problems that are associated with the rising costs and how it affects others, not just college students. The significance of increasing the tuition cost is that in order to make it in today's competitive economy, a college education is extremely important. However, college isn't affordable for millions of Americans. As I just stated before, the college costs are steadily increasing. It's continuing to become harder and harder for parents and students to get the assistance that they need for education, as far as the grants go and scholarships, and then they have to result in going into debt and getting student loans. And the rising cost puts pressure on the campus budgets. It puts pressure on the colleges, and they are trying to make up for, they raise the cost of tuition for different reasons, and I'll go over that here in just a minute, but they think that doing so will help offset some of the, different costs that they have to accrue, but it ends up hurting the students more than what it should. So some solutions to the higher education funding problem are to decrease the funding to non-need-based programs and increase funding to those who cannot afford college tuition. And then restoring private lending and removing the federal government completely from the student loan business, which in the long term, it will result in cutting off the open spigot of money from the government that it's practically allowed colleges to increase cost without any real limits, because they know that they will have that fallback from the government to assist the students and apply unlimited amounts of money for the loans that we're able to get through the government. And this will make the loan market more responsible and limit the taxpayers' exposure to billions of dollars in loan defaults. And then increasing the use of income share agreements is another solution to the problem. That was also on Heritage, an article done on 2021, so this year. And what those do is it allows students to finance their school through the college itself, with an agreement that they'll pay it back based on the percentage of their income that they make once they graduate. So instead of them having an interest rate and a rate based on how much they can pay, it just depends. It doesn't depend on that. It actually is through the college, and we take out the government factor out of that. We take out the loan sharks and the debt and stuff, and it goes directly through the college. So it kind of makes it a little less messy, basically. And again, solutions for rising tuition costs. So cutting the operational costs of some of the schools that I was telling you, that it's hurting their budgets and it's hurting the schools because they are trying to think of ways to offset some of the costs, and then they end up raising the tuition. So state budget recommendations on higher education finance reform, and also innovation and creativity, thinking of different ways that we can address these issues. So addressing the cost challenge will require institutions to rethink many system processes that have already been in place for decades. So we need some new fresh ideas and fresh people coming in, and hopefully coming up with new ideas on how we can solve this cycle of continuing increased cost in tuition and increased debt for students, and it just continuing to be more difficult for students to get the education that they want. There are goals that college students can set in the meantime to help combat these issues. First off, they can choose an affordable school. There are different types of schools. There's community colleges that are actually a little bit cheaper than the universities, so they can kind of consider those, or just compare. Some out-of-state colleges are actually less inexpensive than compared to in-state colleges. So they just kind of need to shop around and not just pick it off based off of the college name, but also kind of take into consideration the cost of the school. And consider applying for grants and scholarships. I know that that's something that most college students think about as soon as they go into even start thinking about college. They are, you know, applying for scholarships and applying for grants, but that's something you definitely need to consider when you're considering going and furthering your education. And then another thing is parents can consider a 529 college savings plan. According to U.S. News, college 529 savings plan is an offer and opportunity for families to grow their savings tax-free as long as the money is spent on qualified educational expenses. So basically, it's a savings account for them to use for their education. And then lastly, another way that goals that students can set to, in the meantime, to help combat these issues is to consider going through a work study through the college. These are part-time jobs on or nearby the campus for eligible students depending on their finances and the funding available at the school. So they have to have submitted the FAFSA in order to qualify, which is the financial aid. And then work study jobs paid students directly. Typically, it's at least once a month. And undergrads earn hourly wages, but the amount you earn can't exceed your work study award for the year. So the amount should also be included in your financial aid award letter sent by the school. So it's considered financial aid, but you're working for it, basically, working through the school and also gaining experience. So there's definitely some benefits to taking that route and doing the work study through the college. So these are all concerns that we need to be addressed. I think the main thing is for us to start rethinking our current processes and the ways that we handle things, especially the college boards. And I think they need to try to think of more innovative ways to handle these rising costs and, you know, think about the students and how the most important thing is that they get their education. So this concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much.